You're listening to the Bible Roots podcast with Pastor Randy Frazee. If you're a church leader looking for creative ideas to help your church engage more deeply with the Bible, this podcast is for you. And now, for today's episode. Well, welcome everybody to this podcast, a podcast all about Bible engagement. In our very first podcast, we started where we needed to start, establishing the case for Bible engagement. And I had a very cool conversation with Callie Parkinson, who is the key voice behind a very important survey tool called Reveal, which has had over 2,500 churches and 600,000 people take the survey. And it shouts out two major discoveries. First, the number one catalyst for spiritual growth is Bible engagement, with no close second. Basically, no matter where a person is at on their spiritual journey, Bible engagement is the key practice that will jettison their step toward Christ. The second big discovery, the number one thing people want from their church is to help them understand the Bible. Think about it. The number one thing that people need and the number one thing that people want is basically the same. And I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. As a leader, as a pastor, I must put the majority of my energy in this direction. And so I want to encourage you to go back and listen to this podcast, this first podcast, leave a review, share it with a few people you know, particularly pastors and church leaders. Now, I am so excited about this second episode because today I'm having a conversation with Scott Beck around the topic of how people grow and so much more. And I have to tell you, Scott is one of the most fascinating, interesting people that I have ever met. And to top it off, his wife and him are intense followers of Jesus. If you're familiar with the Reveal survey, I would definitely say that Scott and Teresa fall in the category of Christ-centered people. Scott is also, in my estimation, a scaler, which is one of the reasons I love hanging out with him. He stepped into a video store back in 1985 and went to the owner, the sole proprietor of this little shop, and said, "We can scale this." And it became, guess what? Blockbuster Video, and scaled, according to my research, upwards to 9,000 stores. Church leaders, think of this in terms of multi-siting. He went on to acquire a chicken restaurant in 1992 that underwent the fastest growth of any restaurant chain in the country. It was called Boston Market. Not only that, he went on to partner with others to raise up Einstein Brothers Bagels, Ancestry.com, HomeAdvisor.com, just to name a few. Now, the rest of the story should read. Then Scott and Teresa retired in their early 40s, bought a private island, which they accessed by a private jet. But that is not what happened. Instead of me telling you what happened, I am glad and excited to welcome Scott Beck here. And Scott, thank you for being on this podcast. And why don't you tell us what happened next?
Well, thanks, Randy. I appreciate the introduction. In all of that, there were a lot of ups and downs. I got to tell you, it sounds like success followed by success, but I can tell you there were a lot of failures in the midst of that. Yeah. And that's really what it means to be an entrepreneur. And, I love the church leaders because I haven't found a more entrepreneurial bunch in my life than people that are willing to go out there and against all odds, build churches, start churches. And so, wow. That's the way that it's been. In reality, God didn't create us to retire and relax. Okay. He got, work was created before the fall. Right. And right. So, work is worship, and how we, present ourselves to God, that's just all part of worship and all part of our own personal growth. So Teresa and I had no interest in slowing up. And in fact, our desire was to take, the skills, the tools, the networks, the resources, and apply them to be able to serve the church in the broadest of senses, not just the churches, but the parachurches and all the organizations that sit around it. So we had no interest in doing anything but continuing to work hard.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Scott, I in the time that I've known you, about it's getting close to a decade now, to be honest with you, I think. there's a great humility to you and to Teresa. And I have to say, I say sometimes, I think the reason the Lord didn't provide for me the same level of financial success he has for someone like you is because he knew that I would get that private island, or I would just get out of the game. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know if I would or not, but you actually work harder than just about anybody I know. So it's not like you're just putting in a couple of hours a day. So what is driving you in that pursuit? I mean, what is that sort of, holy discontent, that sort of thing that must be captured that only you, Scott Beck, can pursue, and so therefore you're giving it all up?
Well, I mean, we all show up with being part of the body, with our unique gifts, with our strengths and our weaknesses, right? That's what it's all about.
Mm.
But what drives us, as you described, we learned a lot about scaling things, about being able to bring infrastructures and economies of scale to industries. And so where our heart was just really, really pierced was the idea that we're moving into this next um, uh, decade with some of the most incredible set of technical capabilities that God has allowed to come into existence for his purposes.
Yeah.
But we realized that they were only going to get accessed by the churches if the churches could get the benefit of their collective might in being able to afford them and then being able to move them. And so that's what's really got us is what does it mean to be able to bring some infrastructures to help churches gain the benefit of these next generation technologies so that they can serve the people with those, so they can scale relationships. It's not about technologies eliminating relationships, Randy. It's about scaling those relational interactions. And how can technologies do that? And Teresa and I, we just said, hey, God willing, we got another 30 years. And we're just going to put it out there and serve the churches and help them scale.
And I'm so excited for people to hear this podcast, maybe some who are super interested in Bible engagement, but just don't know how to get more and more people engaged in scripture. I think it was Billy Graham who made the prediction that the future revival in the church is going to come from business leaders, which is really cool. The partnership of business leaders who love the church, who are partnering up with pastors, who spend a lot of time learning to teach and provide, biblical instruction, coming together to figure how we can grow the kingdom. Again, as I've gotten to know you and as I've done a lot of, you can just Google your name and you find a lot of stuff. Everything is good, by the way, which is really good that I saw. Maybe
you're not digging deep enough.
Maybe on page 15, you can find it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure the same would be true of me. I don't dare do it. But, one of the things in the business world that you were spotted by, people who wrote a lot of these articles is that one of your they uncovered the keys to success is that you took data really seriously when it came to running the businesses that you run. So tell us about that and why you think data, because it sounds kind of unspiritual. It sounds sort of like, where's the Holy Spirit, that kind of thing. But why is that? Put data on the map for everyone that's listening.
Yeah, well, number one, listening is critical, right? I mean, we have to be good listeners. If we're not good listeners, we're not going to be in very close relationships if we don't listen well, and we're not going to serve people well if we don't listen well. So listening is just fundamentally data, right? We're hearing, We're listening, we're asking questions, and so that's super important. The second thing, Randy, the word know, K-N-O-W, shows up more than twice in the Bible as the word love. Okay, wow. Know is fundamental to biblical frameworks and concepts. For us to be known, for us to know, to ultimately be fully known and fully accepted, right? I mean, that's just all part of the equation. So, data is just literally the word that we use right now for being able to better know something. So knowing is critical to all of us.
Well, you know what? That is a really great theology of data, that really undergirding it is love, which is our biggest thing of all in the Christian faith. I mean, love is it. And then just the idea of to know and to be known. And I think, Scott, in our day and age, with a lot of the troubles that we're having with all kinds of political and issues, et cetera, is that people aren't taking the time to listen to one another. And data is just in this research is just an organized way of not just listening to one person, but listening to a group of people, a nation of people, and then developing your strategy from that, right?
Yeah, and it can provide insights. I mean, the work, I mean, we met as a result of the work that you had done around Reveal and the Christian Life Profile.
Yeah.
And, those were seminal works that really, allowed the church to really start to ask questions and to be able to understand more who their congregants were, what was the composition of their church. These are such important things. And, you were pioneering that. That's how we met.
Yeah, that's exactly how we met. And that Reveal got started, through the Willow Creek Association, and I was a teaching pastor there for 3 years, and they were super interested in the work that I did with George Gallup on the Christian Life Profile. I got super interested in this basic idea of like, wow, instead of guessing where your people are at, why don't you listen to them, ask them, and then develop your strategies around that? That just seemed to make a lot of sense. Is that why you purchased Reveal? Is because of your passion for just understanding the people you're serving?
Yeah, well, what we wanted to do is purchase Reveal so that we could get it out there as broadly as possible, so there would be a common framework for churches and the people and the content providers to be able to be on the same page. I mean, literally to get on the same page so that we could start to have a common measurement framework around spiritual growth. And then since then, working with Barna and working with others, there's now, a common framework for vocation and a common framework for finance and a common framework for relationship and a common framework for finance, for mental health. So, these areas of spirituality all the way to relationship, getting common frameworks out there are really important, because then, number one, we can be, speaking the same language.
Yep.
Number two, we can start to measure what matters. Okay. Because what the pastors are brought in is for life change. They want to see lives transformed, right? They want to see them grow spiritually and relationally and vocationally and financially and in their overall health. So now, with getting common measurement frameworks like a Reveal provides, you can start to begin to see what are the interventions, what are the programs, or what are the activities that actually start to move the needle. And, Bible engagement is right there. It's core in all of them. I mean, Bible engagement and prayer are core across all of it.
I want to come back to that in just a second, but the two things that you brought out again that are really powerful, and one is that it creates a common language for us to talk nationally. So the church I'm serving here, they've done Reveal 3 times. One time when I wasn't here, and then right when I came, and we just did it again. So now we have a common sort of benchmark baseline for this church. But what's really beautiful about it is that we're able to sort of compare ourselves nationally with other churches, because, a score of 75, is that good or bad? Well, we have an idea. And then from that, I'm able to go to the congregation and say, we've laid out plans, because churches have limited resources. We want to make sure we're putting our resources toward what's going to help you right here in this congregation grow. And so 1st of January, I'm doing January 9th, I'm going to be doing an entire message on Reveal for our congregation, which is really pretty cool. And so I think that the idea of creating a common language and then putting in place with limited resources that we have, sort of efficacious activity to help them grow is really a powerful reason why you'd want to engage in this discipline. So you talked about Bible study and prayer. Acts chapter 2 laid out that those are 2 of the main 4 devotions. Talk a little bit about that, and not only Bible engagement, but also what you've learned in the area of prayer.
Well, I mean, the data is really clear, and what the data says is that Bible engagement is the number one way to get somebody to continue to grow in a more Christ-centered manner. and getting in the Word and being in the Word. I mean, I am so grateful to my wife, Teresa.
Uh,
I tell you what, she's in the Word all the time, and she is my champion. She champions me to be able to get into the Word more, right? And it's that not only is going to then help us grow, but it also helps us grow as a couple, okay? Because when we're engaging in it together, but Bible engagement is the key. Now, right behind that, prayer. So if you're in the Word, and if you're, making your petitions, before God, those things are just at the core of everything. And I don't care if you look at relationship, or if you look at finances, or if you look at mental and emotional health, or if you look at vocation, all of those things are anchored in the end in the Word and in prayer.
Which is really exciting for anybody listening that's a church leader who, over the last number of years, you're trying to think of what's the next creative thing that I can do, and and how can I keep up with all this innovation. And at the end of the day, the needle hasn't really moved very much in terms of Bible engagement, and prayer, as it tells us in the book of Acts, is kind of the key catalyst for spiritual growth. So the good news is you don't have to go to another conference to find a fancy shrink wrapped package. The scriptures and the Spirit through prayer is really fundamental, which is pretty exciting. Hey, I want to go back to when you first started, what is now called Gloo. You first started it. You just didn't dive right into offering products and services to churches and nonprofits, but rather you took a considerable amount of time. I can't remember how much time, to really study your customer, or you refer to them as a champion, to try to learn from them, just like you've done in the business world. So tell us, what you learned in those first few days, few months, or 18 months or whatever it was. I can't remember.
Yeah, for the first year, Randy, we went, and we decided what we were going to do. There was a group of about 5 of us. Is that we were going to go find champions. We were going to thank them, okay, for what they've been doing. We listened to them. We said, "Why are you doing what you're doing? What do you most need?" And then we asked them, "How can we pray for them?" And they would say, "Well, they pray for what I mostly need." No, we'd say, "No, how can we pray for you?"
Wow.
And then all of a sudden it was like, my son, or my husband, or my neighbor, and so in that first year we literally went on, we called it a listening tour. And we listened and we prayed. And it was after a year of that we decided, okay, we need to get and start to stand in the gap on behalf of this faith ecosystem, these champions, to be able to help them get access to capabilities and technologies, so that they can start to scale with technology, not eliminate relationships. I can't stress that enough, but scale the relational interactions, to scale relationships using technologies. Think of them as superpowers that allow you to have more relational interaction, not capabilities that eliminate the relational interaction.
Yeah.
And it's happening. I was this weekend, I was at Life Church, and we had a service Saturday evening at Life Church, where they were celebrating the 500 millionth installation of the YouVersion Bible app. Which, think about that. It's across hundreds of nations and languages. It's 2 people download that app per second. The amount of stuff that's taking place as a result of technology and the Bible, okay, is unbelievable. The Bible is alive. Okay, it is not dying out. It is doing the exact opposite. Access is increasing, engagement is increasing. The Bible is alive. And it was wonderful being there with Bobby Grunwald and with the whole YouVersion team, Mark Green, and just celebrating what's been done there. The Bible is alive.
Yeah, way to go. I would compare this kind of, it hasn't been like this since the Reformation, when the Bible got intersected with the printing press, right? I mean, this is a similar type of seismic shift that is taking place that is great for us in our lifetime to be able to take advantage of. I would imagine that you're in a way, you're kind of like a Martin Luther trying to sort of connect the beauty of the Bible into this technology and data. Yeah.
Well, I mean, no one wants to be compared to a Martin Luther, but we're all, I mean, the key is to be in the game, right? Is to, technology is not a surprise to God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's not going like, oh my goodness,
Wow.
technology. No, he is allowing technology to get into existence. And he's doing that for his purposes, to accomplish his purposes in terms of people basically coming and be in salvation and relationship with him, and for them people to be able to grow in righteousness. And so if we keep really sort of asking the question of how do we bring technology into alignment with God's design, so that his purposes can be accomplished, and that we all can be transformed as we try to help this along. I mean, that's the name of the game. And so we all have, I believe there's a moral obligation. We as an entire church have a moral obligation to deal with the complexities associated with technology, to bring it into existence in alignment with God's purposes for his glory. And we all have got to be part of that. And so we're playing our part. YouVersion's playing their part. You're playing your part. I mean, everybody's got to show up, and we got to play a part.
And show up and work together, I think, is a big part of what you're building on the Gloo platform, which is really cool. Hey, I remember the early days of us getting to know each other. I would come out to Boulder to your headquarters, and plastered all over the wall were these drawings and this story. And I think I went through it at least 3 or 4 times, and it would change a little bit here or there. But there was one particular drawing on the wall about what you learned, really kind of a simple idea about how people grow, and in terms of a local champion and all of that. Can you recall that and maybe talk a little bit about what you've learned? Because I think pastors and leaders fundamentally need to hear this.
Yeah, a couple of things. When you're building technology, or when you're actually putting infrastructures in place to scale any business, or any enterprise or any industry, you always have got to start with the core process. What's the core process? Okay, if you're gonna be good at renting videos, you better be good at the core process. Buy a video, get it onto a shelf, okay? Be able to check it out, be able to track it, check it back in, and get it back on the shelf. If you can't do that well, okay, nothing's gonna work. We call that the core process.
Okay.
Well, what's the core process as it relates to spiritual growth? It's basically a frontline champion, a pastor, a recovery care manager, a small group leader, championing the growth of another person. That interaction of one person championing the growth of another person, that core discipleship interaction, is the core interaction. And that is what we've got to scale. A church only exists ultimately to be able to provide care and feeding so that people can help each other grow. I mean, if we're going to be successful, we're going to be able to scale that core interaction of one person championing the growth of another, and we're going to be able to scale it not only in terms of technology, but bring content into it and bring care and feeding around it, because that's the core interaction. So that's what we've been pursuing.
Yeah, what's so brilliant about that is, like, here's a person that most of the people listening can't imagine, growing something like Blockbuster, which was so critical in our time. Or how many times I went to Boston Market for exactly the reason that you figured out, and that is that people want this sort of home cooked meal but don't have the time to deal with it, right? And yet you're telling us the core process by which we need to scale is this simple idea of a small group leader, a pastor, and engaging with another human being to try to figure out how we can care for them in such a way that they can begin to grow. And again, everyone listening, it's like that. Scott Beck, the best scaler I've ever heard of in my life, has just given us the core process. Now, in that, there was also something dynamic happens to the person that you're trying to help grow. You're trying to get them to not only receive what you have to give, but you're trying to get them to do something as well. Do you
Yeah,
recall what that is?
absolutely. We call that side switching. Okay. The best way, the best way to learn is to teach. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. If you really want to learn something, teach it. And the same thing is true in terms of personal growth. When that frontline champion is helping that person grow, the best thing they can do is as quickly as possible get that person to help another person
Yeah.
grow, where they've actually switched sides, and the student has become the teacher, right? And that is the whole framework, if you think about it, in terms of discipleship.
Yeah.
And then in effect, what a church is are the elders that are caring and feeding and disciplining the disciplers, right? It's not, we think of it as these large institutions. It's actually just all there to scale those small interactions of one person helping another person grow. And the best way that they can help that person grow is to get them to help another person grow.
Yeah, which is like, right in there, the writings of like in Titus, is sort of that multiplication process, but you're just given verification that what the Bible's really instructing church leaders to do is verifiably the core process that we need to just put all of our energy into and just keep replicating that and stop getting, off track with where we're going. Hi, this is Randy Frazee, host of the Bible Roots podcast, which is brought to you by my friends at Harper Christian Resources. Harper Christian Resources equips you to understand the scriptures, cultivate spiritual growth, and disciple your people with Bible study resources from today's most trusted voices. I want to add another layer to this. When I was coming to you, we were one of the things that I was heavily involved in, and still is to this day, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast for HarperCollins, is I did a thing called the story and then later believe. And in that chart, you have the role of content providers in that process. Can you explain that a little bit?
Right. Well, I mean, it makes sense. If you've got that core interaction, one person helping another person grow, and then likewise making it easy for that person to grow another yet, okay? Giving them some frameworks, giving them some roadmaps, giving them some content is spectacular. I mean, look at what has happened as a result of all of this great Bible study, all the great Bible studies that have been created, the small group curriculums that have been created, where I can take, a family life, art of marriage, and I can basically show up into a small group, and all I need to do is have enthusiasm and energy, and they've injected some content into that core interaction. So now we've got the core interaction between the person growing another person. We've got a church providing care and feeding for that person, and taking responsibility to shepherd them. And then you've got these great content providers that are injecting content into the equation. Now you've got a functioning ecosystem, and ultimately technology needs to allow those exchanges to take place simpler and simpler, with more and more efficiency, and to be able to see what's working and what's not working, so that then they can be continuously improved. And that's all knowing. That's knowing the front line, knowing the person, the front line knowing about that content, the church knowing about that front line. That's the equation. I mean, because ultimately, the key is that people don't gain their value in life through consumption. They gain their value in life through contribution.
Mm.
The It's about contribution. The key to the church from our perspective in this next big move is to use technology to make it easy for somebody in a pew or behind a screen to contribute their energy to help another person grow. It's not about, getting great programs so that these guys are all awesome consumers. No, we want to get them to be contributors.
Yeah.
That's how the church explodes, right? Get the people in the pews, make it easy for them to contribute, make it easy for them to champion the growth of another.
Yeah, that's so brilliant, and it just resonates with everybody listening or watching. In that we have really made a mistake over the last probably 50 to 70 years in focusing too much on making them consumers as opposed to contributors. In the Reveal research, Scott, I recall that while Bible engagement is number one, which would certainly include prayer, serving was number two. And while it wasn't a close second. In fact, it was second, which really undergirds what you're saying, is that to get the scriptures, and prayer into the life of the person you're trying to help grow, and then get them to contribute or to serve, is going to create the best catalyst for spiritual growth. And that's what we need to get good at, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, intersect Bible with prayer and make it easy for people to champion the growth of one another. I mean, it's that alchemy is going to release massive amounts of latent energy in the system. See, platforms, okay, and when we're working at Gloo on platforms, and platforms that allow, cooperative promotion and cooperative data, and protecting all the data, but still giving them the benefit of all of that. When you look at that, and when all that comes together, the idea is ultimately to allow these churches to cooperate, not only within a church but between churches, to release that latent energy. A platform doesn't make things happen. A platform lets things happen.
Wow.
All of those spare bedrooms wanted to be rented to strangers. Okay, they wanted to be. It wasn't until you got the technology right that you released the latent energy of all those bedrooms to get rented to strangers. You had to get the technology right in order for that to take place. The same thing, all of those cars and all those people wanted to be part-time taxi drivers. It wasn't until you could get the technology right that it released that latent energy. Well, what is the latent energy in the church? It's the latent energy that one person has to champion the growth of another. And so everything that we should be doing should be trying to crack those codes, to be a platform, not to make something happen, but to let something happen. And the thing that we're letting happen is Bible plus prayer plus releasing the latent energy of the people in the pews and behind the screens to champion the growth of their neighbors.
And when I go, I was at Chick-fil-A today. We have a tradition on Monday. My wife and I have a cheat day where we're able to go to Chick-fil-A, although she got grilled chicken and kale, so it's not a cheat day for her. But I got my little nuggets and my waffle fries and that cocaine sauce that they have, that
Yeah,
it's
that's
crazy.
great.
So that's what I did. But I'm always amazed at how they have found this core process, kind of like you have done, and they keep running that over and over again. And I think sometimes in the church, we get way too complicated and forget about that core process. And the beauty of platforms like you're developing, where people can find the right things, is really powerful. We may have already covered this, but I thought it was such a cool quote that I read online about you, about research related to Boston Market. They said that you discovered that customers were looking for fresh homemade food that could be prepared with little or no fuss. And I wondered how you might apply that to what people are looking forward to today as it relates to spiritual food. I think we might have covered already some of this, but you have anything else to add to that? Because I thought that was brilliant. And it's exactly why I loved going to Boston Market.
Yeah, well, Boston Market, we caught that home meal replacement. We caught that curve where people were moving toward healthy. They wanted to get rid of the fryers and the microwaves. They wanted to basically get to things that were more authentic. And we saw that early on, and we caught that. I think the same thing is true in the church today. People are looking for authenticity. This younger generation is, you got to be kidding. They got media everywhere. They're not going to be impressed by media. We're not going to have media that's going to impress them. What they're going to be impressed with is authenticity. They're going to be impressed with, there's great research coming out right now that some Christians have come together, and they've got a study going. And what it's showing is that the skeptics and the cultural Christians, they are into Jesus. Okay. They relate to Jesus.
Huh.
And it's because Jesus um, gets them. Okay. Jesus gets them. Jesus was thrown into jail. Okay. Jesus was betrayed, right? Jesus had all of these challenges. Jesus went and hung out with just the normal people, right? And so that research and that insight is you can build on, just like you could build on the insight that authenticity in food was critical. Right now, authenticity in the church is critical. And it really is about the power of Jesus, and it is about Jesus and what he did. And so I think churches getting away from the high production and getting more into the relational intimacy, that's going to be the key. And do that within the context of the person of Jesus.
Yeah, and it was answering. I think we've already answered the question. Like, if you were a pastor, how would you scale a church? I think you've really essentially answered that question, and that we need to get good at the thing that we need to get good at. And one of the reasons you and I are still in a really dynamic relationship is because what you are continuing to create at Glue. And I'm thinking of this sort of collective power that you're creating in cities. And Kansas City, where I'm at, is one of those cities that you are focusing your energy on. And it is, if you're allowing me to be good at what I do, but we can now partner with the other churches in Kansas City to get this collective power. You're bringing that to me, and you've got all these donors that make it hard for me to say no to. And we're seeing tremendous momentum here in Kansas City. Can you tell everybody a little bit about like church cares and from the perspective of someone maybe who's never heard about it before?
Yeah, I mean, churches cares is a relatively simple concept like got milk.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
The dairy guys got together and they have an ad council, right? And that ad council basically says, let's pool our dollars. Let's start to be able to drive the narrative. And let's say that got milk is important. And we're not going to really worry whether we're organic milk farmers or we make chocolate milk or we make ice cream. Got milk is the big idea. So we're like, hey, that's if the church is going to get the benefit of its collective might, there are a number of different ways that it's going to do it. And one of it is through cooperative promotion. So literally in Kansas City, in Dallas, Fort Worth, in Columbus, Ohio, in South Florida, we now have got cooperative advertising that's come together as a result of churches coming together and donors helping out, so that now we can run churches care advertising. So literally in Kansas City right now, when somebody Googles divorce, they're not going to see 6 pages of lawyers and then maybe get to a church. In Kansas City, in South Florida, they're going to see, hey, maybe it doesn't need to end this way.
Yeah.
Churches care. They're relevant to you in your everyday needs. And we are in the last 60 days in those 4 cities, we have connected almost 9,000 explorers into those churches. And I'm not talking about just somebody visiting a website. I'm talking about literally handing off one person to another person in relationship in a church. 9,000 new people connected into those churches in the last 2 months in those 4 cities because of cooperative promotion. This is an ad co-op. Ad councils are not new ideas. I don't know why they don't exist in the church, but now they do. Okay. And that's one of the things that we're doing at Glue. We're super excited about it. It's called Glue Connect, where we're connecting the churches, connecting the explorers, and using the church's care campaigns to be able to do that.
Well, we'll put in the show notes, how to get connected to all of this and learn more about it. And as it's going to grow and come to a city near you. But it's going back to that illustration you gave about that bedroom wanted to be rented out. It was there
Yep.
already. We just couldn't use the connection. And what I'm finding you're doing, because I'm in a city where it's very, very strong, is that we already have Celebrate Recovery and all kinds of things that we do great as a local champion with someone who needs this in our community, an authentic relationship. We already have it, Scott. We don't have to develop it. We already have it. The problem is we got to be able to find the people out there that need it And that's what this does. And we leave that part to you guys who know how to do it really well. And so I think for people that could be resident about it and think, I don't know how to do all this stuff, like, no, you do what you do, and Gloo does what they do, and they have donors who do what they do, and we come in. And so we're using it for Easter this upcoming year. We're using it for all of the recovery programs that we have, these 5 dimensions of human flourishing. We have specific programs like Financial Peace University, and we have work with Les and Leslie Parrott on assessments around your marriage. We're going to use it for Back to Church on Sunday. We're going to use it for Christmas. We're doing a beautiful Christmas at the Movie series, and we want to let people know that are looking for community. We're doing it with prayer now through your Thrive. I know we can't get into all this stuff, but we're using so many of the tools where there's the beautiful thing about what churches do, and primarily getting people to engage with the Bible and prayer with an individual, with a small group of people in your city. And you're bringing this technology to bear, which is just so exciting. I just want everybody to check it out for sure.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And nothing new needs to be invented, really, Randy. It's just what's out there needs to get scaled. Like you said, there are so many good programs, and those programs can sit in those churches, and we just got to make it easy for the churches to adopt them. And then we got to connect the people to the churches. And then guess what? Donors want that to happen.
Yep.
They want to see their cities transformed. They want to be able to see those dials move when you can see, people, are they flourishing more in relationship or vocation or finance or generosity? I mean, they want to see those things. So all the pieces are there. We're just being a little bit of the glue that allows those pieces to come together and work a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, which is really cool because we're a large church, but we're working with churches of 100 in our community here, and we're working side by side together, and they don't have to bring any more to the table than we do to get to experience that same sign of collective power. Because as we recall with the Got Milk campaign about the dairy farmers, one of the things that called them to do this is that they were suffering, right? I mean, they were losing market share. And if Barna hasn't taught us anything, he's taught us COVID taught us that maybe some people aren't as into us as we thought they were, and we're losing market share. We were before COVID, we are now, and we've got to figure out how to work together to pull this off, right?
Yeah, no question. I mean, hey, when 70% of the people are going to church, there's not a lot of people. You got to take them from each other. Yeah, you get down there to now 45% of the people are showing up in church. It's no longer about taking them from each other. It's like, let's grow the market, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of dynamics that are at work right now that make it the most exciting time. Okay. Yeah. It really is. It's the most exciting time. And I think that we're on the the precipice of just a breakthrough in terms of these models where we're making it easy for people in the congregation to help one another. We're getting people that are needing what the church has and getting them connected to the church. So it's a good time.
Yeah, it really is. I'm going to ask you one more question, Scott, before we wrap up. And, you entered into this whole church space. I didn't need to, but you did. And I think you probably learned that and I can say is that church can be kind of frustrating in a lot of ways. But in your journey into the space, I'm going to ask you 2 questions and be straight up. Is that what frustrates you the most about working with churches? And then turn your attention to what encourages you the most.
Yeah. So what frustrates me the most would probably be just a little bit of the rate of change.
Yeah.
Adopting new things is a little bit burdensome, right? And so the rate of change and the adoption of new things is probably the greatest frustration.
Yeah.
But that's nothing compared to the encouragement. The encouragement is this. There is an indomitable spirit of these leaders where against any odd, okay, they're gonna be out there and they're gonna go for it. Everything that we're doing, quite frankly, for Teresa and myself in our life, it's really about that. It's about being able to bring just any kind of energy, any kind of resource, any kind of wind beneath the wings of the frontline champions that are out there, that are our pastors, that are our church leaders, that are committed to serving their people, committed to transforming their communities. I mean, that fires us up. They just don't quit.
Yeah.
And and anything that we can do to be able to help that, make it a little bit easier, give them a little bit more encouragement, give them a little bit more resource, that's what we're going to do. That's why we are in it.
Well, what an encouraging message. You're right. You're right. The frustration is small compared to the encouragement you just gave us. And coming from you as a super successful business guy gives encouragement to guys like me that are in the trenches and don't feel like we know how to pull off all that we're pulling off, that you're spotting, this crazy passion. For me, 33 years now, I feel like I just entered into it yesterday. And I have to tell you, Scott, I'm just really grateful for you in so many ways that you have answered the call of God. You and Teresa answered the call of God in your life to come alongside and help the church. This happened to me early on in my ministry when Bob Buford stepped into the church space and brought a lot of us together. And you remind me a lot of the same kind of encouragement with a lot of muscle of just humbly coming to the church and providing us with these resources that are going to help us in a lot of ways, but also with these fundamental things like Bible engagement and prayer. So I just want to really thank you, my friend. Is there anything else that maybe I didn't chat about, ask you that you might want to throw out?
I guess, number one, thanks. I guess the point I want to make is that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these business people that are out there that are helping, okay, and that want to help more. We just need to make it easy. I mean, I look at our chairman, Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, okay, one of the most high pressure jobs in the world right now, and he's making time to be able to serve into churches. I look at the people like the Greens or the Cathys. I mean, the what they're doing in terms of their yieldedness, and I'm just naming a few. I mean, I am so encouraged by the symphony, okay, the symphony of people that are in the marketplace that are all in for the church. So be encouraged. They're out there and they're in your pews. Just make it easy for them to show up and to contribute. But Randy, I'm really grateful for the long-term relationship that we've had. Thanks for that. You're an encouragement to me. You keep me going, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. Well, everybody, I told you this was going to be a fascinating conversation, and I can't imagine right now that you don't have at least 10 people that you want to share this podcast with. You need to be exposed to the movement that's going on in the church around the country. You do not want to miss it, because we are working together to help individual people in our communities, experience the fulfillment of everything Christ came and died for. And it's going to help you in the area of Bible engagement. It's going to help you in the area of prayer, but it's just going to help you grow in that. So it's not just one person you're working with, but it's a lot of people that you're working with. And so I would encourage you to take this podcast and share it with a number of people. And I want to tell you that we're going to continue this podcast in our episode 3. We're going to be having a great conversation with Kyle Eileman from Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. He's an interesting guy, one of the largest churches in America, but he has a love for the scriptures. And particularly, we're going to learn about what the role of story is in Bible engagement. So until next time, God bless, and we'll see you then. Thanks for listening to the Bible Roots podcast. We hope you were encouraged and energized by our discussion today. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to leave a review. This small gesture will help more church leaders discover our conversations around Bible engagement. And don't forget, like and subscribe to our podcast so you'll never miss a new episode. Now, may your faith be strengthened through God's Word today and every day.